Gluttony isn't just about food. Another definition of gluttony is confusing feeling good and being good. It's privileging feelings above reality. So gluttony says as long as you feel good, you are good. Last week we talked about how apathy was about avoiding our lives through busyness was about avoiding our lives through constant distraction. Gluttony is about escaping them through consumption and indulgence and through seeking pleasure. Gluttony looks a lot more like being controlled than being in control. Gluttony is addiction to anything, to food, to drugs, to alcohol, to sex, to approval, to affirmation, to work, to Netflix. We call it binge watching for a reason. Gluttony is about consuming at all costs, just to keep consuming because when you consume, you feel good. And if you feel good, you are good, which just sounds so much like our culture, which is, I think, part of why we don't talk about this very much. The reality is, if you don't have the ability to say no or enough to something, then you don't actually have the ability to enjoy that thing anymore. And you've become a slave to it. I remember back before I had tiny people to keep alive, I would sit down to watch an episode on Netflix. And before I knew it, 5 or 6 episodes had gone by. And I would think, why am I still watching this? Maybe you have ran into that situation, or you think, why am I still eating or drinking? Why am I going back for more? I'm not even hungry anymore. What am I doing? I sometimes still will catch myself with the fridge open, staring into the fridge for something to eat, and I'm not even hungry. I just want to consume something. Why am I still scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on my phone? The joy of these things the joy of these things that may have at one time offered comfort and maybe have possibly been a part of finding rest for our souls, the joy of them has been lost. Gluttony is handing over joy and freedom to momentary and fleeting pleasure and escape. Gluttony is signing up for an endless chase of pleasure that only costs your life. Proverbs has some pretty clear and punchy things to say about this. The first is in Proverbs 25, which is, this is just such a good, I love this so much. If you find honey, eat just enough of it. Too much of it and you will vomit. Next time someone tells you that the Bible isn't relevant or has nothing to say to us today, you whip out Proverbs 25:16 and then ask them what happens if they eat too much honey. It's wisdom. Proverbs 21:17, you're addicted to thrills? What an empty life. The pursuit of pleasure is never satisfied. Chapter 23, verses 19 through 21. Oh, listen, dear child, become wise. Point your life in the right direction. Don't drink too much wine and get drunk. Don't eat too much food and get fat. Drunks and gluttons will end up on Skid Row in a stupor and dressed in rags. Gluttony steals your joy and your freedom and your life. And there's nothing more miserable than missing out on what we've been created to do and to be because of our gluttonous hearts. It's really hard to be who you've been created to be when you're so focused on just taking more and more and more and feeling good. How difficult it is for you to feel any sort of deep sense of rest for your soul or any deep sense of connection to God when you've handed over your freedom, when you're focused on consuming and numbing out and escaping, when you're so focused on feeling good, when you're stuck trying to satisfy an insatiable hunger. Paul addresses this idea directly, writing to the Christians in a place called Corinth, who, as a community, really struggled with gluttony. In 1 Corinthians 6, Paul addresses a slogan that the church has adopted to justify their gluttony. He says, quoting them, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. I have the right to indulge in anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. Yes, we are free. You are free. But Paul is saying, don't use your freedom to become slaves to something else. The Message version of this passage, I think, also captures the idea really well. It says, just because something is technically legal doesn't mean that it's spiritually appropriate. If I went around doing whatever I thought I could get away with, I'd be a slave to my whims. This idea is echoed in other places in the New Testament, like Galatians 5:1, which says, Christ has set us free to live a free life. So take your stand. Never again let anyone put a harness of slavery on you. Don't squander your freedom by willingly giving it away, especially to the pursuit of empty, fleeting pleasure. As human beings, we're created and called to greatness. We're called to be free, to be able to say no to our desires, so that we can say yes to joy and to freedom, so that we can say yes to feasting and celebrating, so that we can say yes to receiving rest for our souls. Gluttony prevents us from doing any of those things.